1,500 head of cattle will die because that's the only water within a 10 or 15 kilometre radius of that location. Now, do we need to start thinking about farm networks just from the point of view of land's local area networks? Why not use that wonderful network in the sky that satellite NBN offers? If it's looking at and offering access to every parcel of ground in this country, then what about multiple dishes? Why not build receiver systems all over your farm and use the NBN as your communications architecture? But the question is that will the business model support it? If I want to put in 4 satellite or 4 NBN satellite dishes at 4 locations in my farm, do I have to have 4 entirely different accounts? Will I pay the same for each, or will there be some sort of cost investment ratio improvement in doing it? I don't know. And are we thinking about that in terms of developing business models that could offer our farmers the value of what the NBN truly offers? And that's distributed sensor networks over very large tracts of country. And of course, there's this whole issue of compatibility. I think video linking, video phones, whatever you want to call them, are set to make the biggest inroads into our farming community in terms of what the NBN can offer. But will they all talk to one another? If I have a phone from brand A and my vet in town has a video phone from manufacturer B, will they communicate with each other? And so what we don't want is the Tower of Babel going up, whereby we have a whole range of technologies appearing and they simply won't talk to one another, just a cautionary note. So these are some of the challenges I think we need to think about. If you're interested in actually focusing on challenges, and I guess I can slip a quick plug in here, there is a conference coming up in the middle of the year devoted entirely to Australian farming and the digital rural future, Australia's economy. So I just wanted to raise your awareness of that in case you'd like to take what you've heard in these last 2 wonderful days and then focus right in on what it means to our farming sector. Thank you very much. I'm open for questions.
Thanks, David. Absolutely fascinating. I've got one quick question before I go to Twitter. It's something I often talk about in relation, you mentioned satellite there, and I get a little bit frustrated when you talk to some NBN reps and they talk about fibre in various areas and they start talking about satellite as being a reasonable technology. And I often quoted them, as you probably know, 35,786 kilometres is what the geostationary satellites sit at. 3 by 10 to the 8 metres per second, we haven't proven that wrong yet. So you've got an inherent latency of 477 milliseconds just with those alone, plus your normal latency. You're probably getting up close to half a second, maybe even a second of latency. So some of the applications you're talking about, I agree that the latency probably isn't an issue. Some of the other ideas in terms of the NBN, video conferencing, teleconferencing, real live time data, I think that does become an issue. So the latency you mentioned there, you don't think it's as big an issue. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
Okay. Certainly, when we're talking about data exchange, and I'll try and draw a distinction between data and information. Data exchange, I propose that it's not going to be an issue. Video conferencing, I think, is the one to hone in on very quickly. And look, half a second. Now, that's not a trivial amount, because we know when we watch the news on telly and they're talking to a correspondent overseas, their mouth hangs open for a good half a second after the question was finished and you notice it. But what about the definition? And what do you want from your video conferencing? If we can get over the latency question-answer and we can maintain the fidelity of the image, and I guess what I'm suggesting is that is not going to overly detract from the value of a face-to-face conversation. Looking someone in the eye, take it from a telehealth perspective, looking at the way they move, the colour, the tone, the whole deal. So much in body language. And I think it's a work in progress to work out exactly what the frustration levels are or the impacts on effectiveness are of video conferencing with latency. But like I'm saying, if we focus on the definition, and the latency is here to stay, we can't get around it. I think.
Well, we can by putting up 66 low Earth orbiting satellites at 781 kilometres.
Yeah,
a little bit more expensive than the couple of satellites from the NBN. But yeah, look, it's an interesting point. I think it's worth people being aware of, because I think sometimes the NBN is sold to regional people that will be just as good. The satellites will be faster, but they still have that latency issue. But look, there's some interesting points there, I think, in terms of the expectation, I think, is the main thing you're talking about there. I want to go to one question before I go to the audience. And Luke Cameron's asked, is Dubbo well positioned because of the fact that we're getting the NBN and because of the fact that we're an NBN POI? Are we well positioned, do you think, to really try and push more business and data centres to be able to support the regional farming community outside the regional, in the entire region around Dubbo?
Yes, I think you will, and like I said, we've got a significant component of the sector out here. But you have to bear in mind that if we put it together, farmers won't flock to and use it. I mean, we have, just with the technology that we've spent the last 10 years all over the world demonstrating, payoff intervals of 3 to 5 years on major technology investments, we still have an adoption rate in that sector of about 20%. So what will happen is that the first wins will come by just engaging those innovative growers, those technocratic growers that are out there utilising the technology. The real challenge is going to be how do we get that other 80% of the sector engaged? Now, I think the NBN can help that, not only from the point of view of the technology adoption on the farms, but by coming at it from a different perspective, and that's around their social support. In other words, once they use it for other things, not intimately connected with the business of farming, but the lifestyle of farming, I think they'll start reaching out towards some of the other business opportunities that are around there.
So there might be a good business reason to download movies or watch TV on demand. Once you start using it, then you might use it for other things.
Yes, why not now ring up my, that's right, buy myself a video phone or something like that and talk to say Tim Neal, who's running precisionagriculture.com. He's got 400 clients and still is on the telephone describing what they're looking at on his own website. So you're right.
Yeah, okay, that's great, thanks. Some questions from the audience. Some questions, yep, right down here in the middle here. If we can just get a microphone to the young gentleman in the middle, please.
Hi, David. Great presentation. Thank you for that. Just wanted to know where Australia stands kind of internationally with the adoption of this technology in agriculture. And is it a case that if it's not taken up to the levels that we need, does the Australian agriculture industry tend to become less internationally competitive because of that?
Okay, the adoption rate in Australia might sound, quite low, but it is still ahead of the rest of the world. But also, I can tell you for a fact that every year when we have our international precision agriculture type conferences in Europe and in the US, Australian growers are very heavily sought after. For the very reason is that Australia is one of the most innovative countries when it comes to this sort of technology, because the challenges we face, in Europe and in the US, generally nutrition is the limiting factor in the way their crops and pastures grow, so they develop technologies to manage nutrition. We've got the other stuff that we have to deal with, which is the wet stuff. So there's a whole raft of technologies and approaches that we're using in Australia, even in amongst that relatively small community of innovative growers, that are streaks ahead of the rest of the world. So we're not lagging the world in any way or form in relation to precision agriculture. I can tell you that for a fact, or in terms of technology in agriculture. And I think at the end of the day, the challenge that we have in Australia is just the same as the rest of the world. The weakest link in the adoption of these technologies, and it's been proven a couple of times, is that we're not engaging properly the technology developers and the extension people and the growers in the process of developing the technology. In other words, it just hits the market and the growers then decide, do I want to buy this stuff or not? And I think that's where those more cautious farmers sit back and say, well, I'll wait till they buy it and watch for a few years to see if it's any value. What we can now develop, I think, and the opportunity lies is in developing the outreach and extension packages that can go with husbanding that adoption process, and I think that will address that current weak link in the chain. So I think we're ahead of the world, and I can say that as a fact, but also I think the NBN is going to make a big difference in picking up that extra proportion of growers, a significant tail on the dog that we need to get hold of.
All right, thank you.
Sorry,
Yep, follow.
Would it be a case then of arguing with the government that, if we are to remain internationally competitive, then this is an essential service?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go for it. I'm in there too.
Right, thank you. Further questions from the audience? Over here, the young lady in the red coat. Sorry, the young, good-looking lady in the red coat. Is that better, Felicity?
Just keep straight. Thanks very much, David. Felicity from RDA, and it's a broad question, not necessarily related to your topic, but you made a comment about the 7%. And I think it also relates to the early adopters, and it's a reflection of even the crowd that we've been able to draw. In your view, what's the opportunity in actually hitting that engagement through an outreach and extension, not necessarily just for the primary industry sector, but broadly about the opportunity that presents?
I think we have to take the field day model. The sector is a great case in point. You know, the field days still work. You know, field days are packed every year. There's no question about it. And so, you know, we need to take that field day model and push it out there. And what I'm getting at is you literally need to pick a handful of farms and, if necessary, put the technology on site for them and husband them for the process, and the word will get out. The people will come in, make those farms the focus of field days, demonstrate the smart farms, dare I suggest, is the way to go. I can tell you that, you know, our little smart farm exercise we're working on in New England with our friends in the CSIRO, the biggest impact that we have had to date is on people that simply we bring inside the manager's cottage and get them to do a video link back to a service provider in town. Just a simple video chat. And they go, oh crikey, you know, I thought Skype was good through my mobile plan. This is nothing like it. It's totally different. So in other words, you literally need to set them up in a few farms and label them, and just like the field days would do when you're growing a new variety on a farm. You march them all out and have a look around. Makes a big difference.
Right, thanks, David. We're about to break for lunch, so thank you for the presentation. Big round of applause, please, for David Mann. So just a couple of quick things before we break for lunch. We've got a demonstration from Rob Pickering from Anatel, a live demonstration starting in about 15 minutes, and he's going to demonstrate unified communications. And a lot of people hear the term unified communications, or UC, and it's actually quite exciting to see it in the flesh. So go next door. I don't think Rob's doing a formal presentation. I think he's just going to have some products there and just do some straight-out demonstrations. So that'll be exciting to see. For your lunch, we've got the van out the front there, so they've got various foods and coffees out there, so you can go and grab your lunch there, maybe even grab that before you go in and watch the demonstration. Of course, the expo, we've got all the exhibitors next door, and have a chat to those guys. They're all sponsors. They're supporting this event, making this event possible, so try and have a talk to them and support them if you can. And of course, the heavy vehicle driving simulator, it's fantastic to have a go of that. Western Tape have got that out there. Have a look at that if you can. Jump in, have a drive. It's good. You can crash a truck without actually hurting the truck or hurting yourself, so it's good fun. The other thing we talked about was the Twitter prize. So I've been monitoring the tweets there, and the winner from this morning, there's a few good entries there. I love Daryl's sense of humour. I keep seeing Daryl's, but Daryl was just pipped in this session by Kim Trist. And she had a few good tweets there. The one that probably got me was the one that she asked of Brad Howarth about how important it is to be in a connected world and what happens when you're disconnected. So that redundancy, they're big issues. And one of the things was about trust in a digital economy is that people are still a little bit reluctant to go and move their business entirely over to the cloud because they're always worried about that possibility of a disconnection. So that was a great question. We've got a free coffee and a free present for Kim. I assume she's in the audience because she's been tweeting away like mad. If you want to just come down before lunch and grab that prize. So then, front, thank you. You knew you were going to win. You were sitting down the front there. Right, so a break for lunch. We'll be back at 1:30 to start off the lunch break. Thank you. Great morning session. See you back here after lunch.